morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you're watching this, welcome to the Mr. Sinn channel. Today, we're going to talk about a scary topic for many students. We're going to be talking about AP multiple choice tests. Now, I'm sure many of you before have heard things like, when in doubt, put C. And this video isn't going to be giving you tips like that. The goal of this video is to give you 8 tips that I believe will actually help improve your scores when taking an AP multiple choice test. These tests can be challenging. They have multiple right answers, and oftentimes students struggle. It's a very difficult test to take. Now, one thing that's important to remember is everyone is different when it comes to taking tests. Some of these tips might work better for you compared to another student, and that's okay. But generally, I found these 8 tips to help my students get better test scores in my class and also on that national exam. Now, these aren't in any particular order, but my first tip is skim through the test. When you first get the test, you're going to be very compelled to immediately start answering, going through the test, and you're going to be kind of panicked. It's okay. You're timed. It's understandable. But take a minute or two, and before you start answering questions, skim through your test. Flip through it a little bit. Maybe you'll see some questions you know right away. Answer those. One of the things you're doing when you're looking through the test and you're skimming it is you're kind of priming your brain. You're getting yourself ready for what's to come. You're looking at what type of questions are there, what content is being assessed. Maybe you start to notice that some of the questions are similar. Have you ever gotten to the end of a test and you've noticed, okay, I think I answered a question already that was like this. Some of the questions might give you the answer to other questions. So by just quickly skimming through the test, you can identify some of that earlier. That can help you answer some of the questions you might not know. Now, with this tip, I will say, do not take too much time skimming through the test. This should be quick. The goal here is just to kind of look through, see the questions, and hopefully be able to help you answer some of the more tricky questions. Tip number 2 is to read each question in its entirety. Now, this seems simple. It seems like common sense, but you will be amazed at how quickly you are going to start skimming questions. When you're taking these tests, they're difficult, they're timed. You're going to be panicking. And when we're panicked and we're stressed, our brains don't always think clearly. So make sure you take the time to read the entire question. If there's directions or a prompt, always read those as well. Sometimes the test actually has the answers in those directions or in the prompt that's connected to the question. Also, make sure you're on the lookout for questions that are not questions, or which of the following best explains this concept. Oftentimes with AP tests, they're going to ask you questions that have multiple right answers, and you're trying to find the one that is the most correct. And this can be difficult. But when you slow down and you break down a question, you'll be able to find that answer. I would also really encourage you here to underline words. If the question has vocab in it, or if it's a particular theme, underline that. So that way when you're looking at the answers, you're able to see exactly what you should be answering. Tip number 3 goes right along with tip number 2, and it's just read all the answers. Many students, again, are panicking, they're stressed, they see a question, they see an answer, and they're like, that's gotta be it. They circle A, they circle B, and they move on to the next one. But remember, some of these questions have multiple right answers or answers that look right, but there's one that's actually more correct. So you always need to read all of the answers in a question, even if you think you've got it. It could be that E is just a little bit more correct compared to A. So always make sure you're reading all the answers and you're reading those questions carefully. Tip number 4 is for when you get a question that has a prompt, a scenario, or a stimulus component. Anytime you see this, always review that first before going on to the question. You're going to get questions that use maps and tables and charts and images. Always make sure to review those first. If it's a map, what is the map of? What's the legend? What is going on in the information that's being presented to you? That's important for you to do. And the reason why that is the question underneath that is going to be very specific to that data that you're looking at. And so if you don't understand the data, you can't answer the question. Oftentimes my students have made the mistake of they go down to the question and they're looking at it and they don't understand what they're doing because they haven't reviewed the material that has been given with that question yet. So then they become more stressed and they make some simple mistakes. So first, whenever you see these questions, take some time and review the data. Then go on to the question and the answers. This will reduce your stress and will help you better answer that question. Tip number 5 is check for themes. Oftentimes when you're reading a question, you'll notice some themes in it. Maybe the question's just talking about politics or the environment or demographics or spatial concepts. If the entire question is being framed in one manner, odds are the answer also is going to connect to that specific topic. So when you look for themes and you're carefully reading your questions, you can eliminate sometimes some answers that might at first seem correct, but they don't connect exactly back to that theme of the question. For example, if I have a question that's talking about environmental factors that are impacting a culture, I'm not going to pick the one then that's dealing with politics or a spatial interaction. I need to pick one that's going to connect it to that environmental component. So when you look for themes within the question, you can then help identify some answers that could possibly be correct. The sixth tip for you is remember where you learned the concept. If you get to a question and that answer's right on the tip of your tongue and you just can't remember it, try to think about that PowerPoint, that book, the environment you were in, and when you learned it. This will actually activate a phenomenon that's unique to humans, and it improves our ability to recall information. It's known as the context-dependent memory. Now, what this means is when you're thinking about the event of when you learned something, or the environment, or the atmosphere around you, or what images you were looking at when you were learning that concept, that can activate in your mind those specific details that are just outside of your grasp. So by trying to remember exactly where you were when you learned the concept, you're taking advantage of some psychology there to help you actually come up with the answer. Tip number 7 is rechecking your work. And this is one that I'm sure you've heard about a lot. But this is also one you should be careful of. You'll hear from a lot of teachers, put stars by an answer that you're not sure of. So that way when you go back, you can recheck it. If you're doing that, that's great. Just make sure you don't put too many stars or dashes or whatever you're using that you end up rechecking everything. Then it's not as effective. One tip that could help you too here is instead of waiting to the end of the test to recheck all of your questions, actually when you're done with a page, recheck that page. That could help you actually reduce the amount of questions you're looking at all at once. And that'll make it so you're making less mistakes. It also helps you at the end of the test when you have to go back through everything, you've already looked it over. So that can make that process more efficient and speedy. Tip number 8 is one that most students need to do more of during testing, and it's relax. Now this is easier said than done. I understand the need to do really well on your test and to succeed. That's great, but don't let it come at the cost of beating yourself up. When you're taking an AP test, you're going to see a question that you don't know the answer. It doesn't matter how much you studied the night before, how many hours of work you did, you will get questions you don't know, and that's okay. But you don't want to start spiraling during a test. If you get to a question you don't know, relax. If you need to take a little mental break, take that mental break. Skip the question if you need to and come back to it later. The worst thing you could do is focus on that question you don't know and then start beating yourself up. This is going to make you become more stressed, and it's going to make you actually mess up more on questions you do know. And remember too, if you don't do well on a test at the end of the day, go back to your teacher, review it. That's actually one of the best things you can do to improve your test-taking ability. Look for themes. Where there are areas that you keep missing. Maybe it's always not questions, or maybe it's describe which one is the best. These can help you identify weak spots. So always go back and recheck your work after you get your grade. That'll help you learn from your mistake. And there you go, 8 tips that could help you do better on AP multiple choice tests. Now you can take them or leave them, that's up to you. But hopefully they helped you out a little bit. AP tests can be difficult. And remember, at the end of the day, it's just a test and it doesn't define you. Now, throughout the school year, I'm going to have other videos that'll actually break down multiple choice tests where I'll go through and you'll see me actually underlining the questions, breaking down for themes, and trying to identify how to break down questions that might be more difficult. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, if you need more help with your AP class, don't forget to check out the Ultimate Review Packet. I'm Mr. Sinn. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you online.